Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Cruella. So what Cruella is essentially about is basically we do center on the Cruella character, but this was when she used to be called Estella. She is this very aspiring fashion designer. This is really like what she wants to do, and one day she gets this opportunity to work for this character named the Baroness. She's someone that is very well respected within the fashion industry, but it's pretty clear very early on that these two are very much starting to clash, and this eventually leads her to unleash the Cruella persona and really going down the darker path that we eventually know that she will. So Cruella overall, I'll be honest, I mean, I was not very excited for this movie when it was first announced. Look, Disney live-action films, I've said it before, they're just getting very tired. I feel like they're at a point where they're just starting to feel very unnecessary, very repetitive, and I just didn't really see the point in a Cruella movie. I've never watched 101 Dalmatians and thought, what happened to Cruella? How did she get to this point? That's not something that ever really interested me. But I do have to say, when we actually started to see, like, the first look and the trailers, I started to get a little bit more into it. It looked like they were going for something a little bit different with this film, so that definitely did excite me. And actually, leading up to this film, I rewatched both the 101 Dalmatians cartoon, but also the live-action adaptation from, like, the 90s, both of which I think hold up really well. The cartoon is a classic and always will be, but I think the live-action film is one of the few that actually does work. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and so I was really hoping Cruella could be something really special, and thankfully it actually was. I think this is actually one of the few Disney live-action films that actually does kind of work and do something different than you really are, than really we would expect it to, and that's something that really does impress me about Cruella. There's a lot of things that I really do like about this film, but we are just getting into it now, starting off with the cast. And easily, that's one of the best things about this film for sure. I think if the cast was not as good as they were in this film, I just don't think this movie would very much work at all. But gratefully, I mean, the cast here, everyone really just does such a great job within these roles. Let's first talk about Emma Stone. She's one of the best actresses working today. You already know that. I don't think I really need to delve into that any further. But as usual, she absolutely kills it in this role. I mean, this is a real powerhouse performance from her. She really does a great job in leaning into this character, but also showing us this character's hopes, her dreams, you know, what she really does want to do, making us root for Estella, so when she starts to go down this darker path, you know, you don't really know, you don't really know how to feel about it and if this is the right choice that she should do, but she really does lean heavily into this character. Yes, she's very over the top at points, but it really does work, and I think she just does some really great work here. She's very likable in the role. She, again, really transforms herself, and I just really loved what she ended up doing here. I thought that she was really great, and she has one monologue especially in like the third act of this film, and it just really reminds you how great of an actress that she really is, because again, while she is very over the top and sometimes campy in this role, she does lean into a lot of the emotion and intensity of it as well, and I think it's something that only someone as talented as Emma Stone could really do, and again, it just really reminds you of her talent overall, so just always blown away by her, but once again here, just really proves how great she is. Really, the scene stealer of this entire movie has to be Emma Thompson as the Baroness, who is fucking great in this role. I mean, I can't think of anyone better to really play this role than Emma Thompson, but she completely embodies this character. This is a nasty and just evil woman who really won't cross any lines whatsoever. There really isn't a line that she won't cross. There really isn't anything she won't do. She'll do whatever she can to make sure things go her way. She's very relentless in that way, and she just really kills it in this role. You really do see just the cruelness of this character, but it's in a way that you really do love to hate her, and she also has a few more dimensions to her than I really was expecting her her to have, and I think she does a really great job in this role. And I mean, Stone and Thompson, they're just so electric in terms of chemistry. They work off each other so well. I think the film really is actually at its best when these two are on screen, and they really do some great work throughout this entire film. And the film really is worth seeing just for these two performances alone, who are just so well cast in this movie. But gratefully, the rest of the casting also does a really great job. Someone who I don't think is getting enough credits is the combined effort of Joel Fry and especially Paul Walter Hauser as Jasper and Horace, who I really did love in the original animated film. I thought those two characters were a lot of fun, but here you really do get to see a lot more of them, just how mischievous they are, but also how loyal they are to Cruella. They're genuine friends to her, and they're a lot of fun to watch. Paul Walter Hauser especially is such a scene stealer in basically any scene he's in. He's so much fun in this movie, and I really loved what they ended up doing with both of these characters. They both were just so dynamic in these roles, and I think they work very well together. Mark Strachan is really good here. Kirby, Howell-Baptiste. I mean, really, this entire cast, everyone really does a great job throughout this movie. I think this film is really well cast overall, and definitely one of the best things about this film. But now let's get into the directing and the writing, because that is the thing I really do want to talk about with this film, and the thing that I think makes it that much more special. Craig Gillespie's directing in this film is distinctly different from anything you've seen in a Disney film before. In fact, it's very not Disney in a lot of ways, because yes, this film does have a lot of moments that I think can be a lot of fun, but I think it should be noted that this is definitely a little bit more edgy than you're expecting. The comedy in this film is very dark, and it works for sure. The movie is a lot of fun to watch, but it's not the type of comedy that Disney really does go for, and that's something I really did appreciate, but it also has this real edge to it. It's something that's trying to be a little bit more sophisticated than what you would expect, and I think it really does work in that way. The film is, I think, just as much of this sort of character study of the character of Estella, as it is this, you know, very silly sort of dark comedy. I think it works as both of those things, and that's something that Gillespie just does a really good job with directing. It kind of does remind me in a way of his directing in I, Tonya, where he's directing someone that is looked at in a way where, yeah, she did do something really unethical. She did do something that's really bad, but you can see that Gillespie, he's trying to get you to understand her, sympathize with her in a way, and I think he does the same thing when it comes to Estella's character. Now, yes, obviously, a lot of people have brought up the fact that, oh, she kills dogs, why would you ever want to sympathize with someone like that? But I think it's important to know going into this movie is that this is not really a prequel, at least not in a traditional sense. This is very much a reimagining of the character, a way that maybe she could have become Cruella, but it doesn't lean as heavily into the stuff that you know Cruella for as you would think it does. And that's something I really did appreciate, is that he is trying to go for something really different here, and I think it really does work in terms of his directing overall. So in general, I mean, like I said, the movie is very funny, and he had me laughing a lot, but he had me just as emotionally invested as he did entertained. And his directing, again, it has a very specific sort of feel to it, and it really puts an interesting spin on this story that you may think you know where it's going, but you really don't. There's a lot of interesting directions that he takes, and I think it makes for a far more rewarding experience overall that I really did appreciate, and I think this is more of what Disney needs to be doing. I notice this happens a lot. They'll bring in these directors, but they don't really let these directors do anything. They don't really let these directors show off their talents. And I'm glad with Cruella, they actually did let Craig Gillespie, as a director, showcase his talents, showcase what he wanted this film to be, and they didn't try to compromise that at all. I think that was definitely the right direction to go, and moving forward, I want to see a lot more of that. I don't want to see something like The Lion King where you have Jon Favreau, but it doesn't feel like he's directing the movie. I want it to be more like this because it has a very, it gives the film a certain flair, it gives the film a certain appeal that I think would otherwise otherwise be removed if you didn't have the director as involved with this film as well as he was. But you do feel the passion. You do feel his craft throughout the movie. It feels like this is what he wanted to do, and it just, again, I know it's very basic, but like it's a very refreshing feeling because I feel like Disney has just robbed so many directors of really getting to show their true visions, and here that is not the case at all, which I really did appreciate. And the writing as well here, I think, is really well done. Dana Fox and Tony McNamara, I think, have a really good screenplay for this film, especially when it comes to the Estella character, because, like I said, you go into this film and you think it's going to be a prequel, and I really would not consider it one. It's a different take on this character. The character of Estella is one that has these really big dreams of being this fashion designer. You know, she wants to become something really special, but she doesn't necessarily have the confidence to do so. You can see that she's a little bit soft-spoken. She doesn't really know how to really go about this, and so when she meets someone like the Baroness, who is so larger than life, you can see that this really does start to affect her, because the Baroness is someone that, again, has no real limits, but she also has this confidence and this selfishness to her, and this is something that Estella really does notice, and something that she really does want to have. But it's a little bit more than that. It's not just she is doing this because she's jealous of the Baroness's success. There is a connection to something that has happened in her life that a lot of people, yes, have talked about on Twitter, but I have to say, in the context of the movie, it actually really does work. It's a good motivation for this character, and you understand what really drives her to bring out this darker persona. I think they did a really good job with that, and the ways that they slowly unravel things, I thought was really well done. There's a lot of points in this movie that are quite unpredictable, and I did not see them going in the directions that they did, so that's something else that I definitely got to give them credit for, and I haven't been able to say that about a Disney film in a while, because a lot of them are, live action ones, that is, a lot of them are very predictable, and I wouldn't say this film is. There's a lot of directions it takes that I really would not have expected. So I think it does work really well. But again, like I said, I think it also works as a really good character study for this character of Estella. You know, you understand who she is. You understand why she wants to embrace this darker persona. But you also get to see that the Baroness is, and this is what makes, I think, the Baroness one of the better Disney villains, is that she's a very complex character herself. Yes, she's someone that's very ruthless and very cutthroat, but she shuts herself off from basically anyone in terms of, you know, in terms of actual emotion, in terms of an actual connection. She doesn't have that with really anyone, and I think they dived into that very well, and the contrast between those two characters, I think, is really well done, and it's definitely one of the best things about this movie for sure. And I think because of the good work that they do in this film, I think for a lot of people, this is going to be the definitive version of Cruella. And for me, I'm all here for that, because I really do think this film does enough to make this version work. No, this is not the version that you saw in the 60s film. I want to reiterate that. This is not at all the same type of story, but for what they're really trying to do, I do think this ultimately works. And like I said, the movie itself is really funny. I mean, just seeing the things that Cruella will do to constantly top the Baroness is a lot of fun. And the way that Jasper and Horace get in on the act as well, they're not just bumbling idiots either. You actually get to see the care that they have, and that makes some of their more comedic moments that much more effective. There's actually a really sweet moment between Jasper and Cruella that happens in the movie, and I was like, okay, I really like this. I didn't think they were going to take it in the direction that they did, but I thought it really worked, and I thought they did some really good work there. So I think the comedy is really good, and like I said, the film is very unpredictable. There's one direction especially that takes in the third act that I would have never expected for them to do, but it made that much more sense with what they were setting up in the film, with what they were really trying to get at. I think they did a really good job overall. So Again, I think the screenplay is, for the most part, really good here. I don't really have too many issues when it comes to the screenplay overall. The one thing you can definitely say, though, about this movie that I think really sticks out is the cinematography. I think even if you don't like this movie, you can't deny just how immaculately conceived everything is. I mean, the set design, the costume, it's all so lavish and beautiful to look at, but it also is really well filmed. I mean, there's one shot especially, and it's like this dolly around the Baroness's, like, the Baroness's room, like where she works and things like that. And I was honestly so stunned by how well handled it was. I mean, it was such an amazing shot, and they did a really great job, I think, when it came to that particular scene in the movie. There are a lot of scenes in this film that are really well shot, and I really did appreciate the cinematography a lot here. That being said, because the film has so many good practical effects in terms of costumes and things like that, when they use those CGI Dalmatians, it's very obvious that that's CGI, and that is definitely something that did sometimes take me out of the movie, and I didn't really understand why they needed the CGI Dalmatians. I feel like you could have easily just used like regular dogs, and I think it could have worked, but the CGI that they did on the Dalmatians, again, it was just fairly obvious, and I don't think it was really all that great. And I do understand that there are certain things that you can't do with practical effects because of what the Dalmatians do in this movie. It just wouldn't work if they had, like, real Dalmatians. But I just found it very distracting, and it was very obvious to me, like, yeah, that's CGI. That's not real. And there were points where it did sometimes take me out of the movie, I'm not gonna lie. But the score here by Nicholas Britell, once again, I mean, he is just one of the best composers working today. I was talking about him recently in the Underground Railroad, and once again here, he really does kill it, and just continues to be one of the most dynamic composers out there. I really like the score he did for this movie, and the soundtrack as well. I mean, the soundtrack in this film, it has to be one of the best that I've heard in quite a bit. There are so many fantastic needle drops within this film. There's so many songs that I think fit the tone of the scene very well. The film has a very, like, steampunk edge to it, and I think the songs really do complement that quite nicely. I will say, though, I do think at points the soundtrack can be a little bit too involved in the film. I think that the film is a bit of an over-reliance on the soundtrack, to the point where there are whole scenes that go by where, you know, there'll be a song that plays, and I'm like, okay, this is actually really good, this is really working for the scene, and then we cut to the next scene, and immediately there's another needle drop, and it just feels like a little too much at times. I feel like they got a little too carried away when it came to the soundtrack. It felt almost like they were trying to overcompensate for the story, and I didn't feel like they needed to, because the story they were telling is a really good one. You don't need constant needle drops every 5 seconds, but sometimes it became a little bit distracting. And I'm not saying always, because there are a lot of times that it does work, but there were moments in the film where it would play and I'm like, yeah, we don't really need this. Like, we literally just had another song play. You don't need another one to happen like a scene later. It didn't really work in the way they wanted to, so that's definitely something that I think brought the film down a bit for me. The editing, though, I will say, though, I think this film is very well paced. I've seen a lot of people complain about the runtime, but I never really felt it. I felt like the 2 hour and 10 minute runtime kind of just breezed by for me. I never found myself bored with what they were doing or anything like that. I, again, was pretty invested the entire time, so I really don't have many complaints in terms of the editing overall. I think the film is really well done in terms of editing. There's a lot of good there's a lot of good editing throughout this film that I think works very well. So again, there's a lot that really does work about Cruella. It's very different in that way. But that being said, there are some things in this film that I do have some gripes with, because like I said, while this film is trying to be something wildly different than the other Disney films, it's trying to be more adult, it's trying to be more sophisticated, it's trying to lean more into a more psychological type, story, more of a Devil Wears Prada sort of homage. There are points in the movie where it is clear that Disney wasn't really happy with that. They stepped in and they're like, okay, I see that you want this to be a different vision, but how about this? And any of the how about this moments, did not work for me. There's at least 2 or 3 instances in this movie where they are blatantly trying to tie it into the cartoon, and I just don't think it fits here. I think that it was very out of place, especially in the mid-credit scene. The mid-credit scene, they heavily imply that something is going to happen, and I just don't think it works in this universe. I think with the story that they're telling here, I just don't think that it's going to lean into the cartoon as well as this movie really thinks it does. I don't think this is a film that you can watch and you can just jump right into the classic, 60s film and it'll feel like there's a complete story. Again, it feels like this is a different take, and I have no issue with that. So I don't understand why Disney tried to force this in, because it just didn't really work. There are 2 characters that appear in this film, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of strange. They have similar names to these characters, and then you're like, oh, that's why. And when I had that moment, it just disappointed me, because it felt like Disney, while they wanted to take chances, they still don't want to take all the chances that they have. They don't want to take every opportunity to truly just let the director do what he wants to do. Let the writers do what they want to do, because it's clear that they're trying to go for a different take here. They're trying to tell a different type of story. They're not necessarily trying to tie it into what's come before, but I don't think Disney fully recognized that, and it just really frustrated me at points. Again, these are only a few key points in the film, but because the film was doing such a good job at trying to be something different, when they would then try to tie it into what we've seen before, it just came off as very distracting and out of place overall. But other than that, Cruella, I think, is a very refreshing Disney film. It's much more adult than you are expecting. It's a lot more sophisticated. It's very well helmed by Emma Thompson and Emma Stone, who absolutely carry the entire film. It's a lot of fun at points, but it also dives a lot deeper into Cruella as a character than you really are expecting it to. It's got a fantastic soundtrack, beautiful production design, and just in general, it makes for one of the better Disney films that we've seen in quite a bit. If this is the direction that they are trying to go in terms of their live-action films, I'm all for it. If you want to give me more of something that is a different take, something that is generally different, and something that doesn't necessarily need to tie into things, I think it does really work. But Disney really needs to make a decision where, do they want this to tie into something or not? Because a lot of this movie, it isn't trying to tie into what we've seen before, but some of it very much is, and I just don't think that they've really established that yet, but that's not really a hindrance on this film. I think that's just something that they need to really recognize. They really need to sort of come to that, they really sort of need to come to the decision of what they really want. And for me, if I was, working at Disney, this is definitely more of what I want to see. Don't give me those like shot-for-shot live-action remakes. Give me much more of this, and I really do think they could turn into something special. Overall, I had a really good time with Cruella, and I am going to give it a B. But over, guys, to my review of Cruella. Let me know what you guys saw of this movie. All left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.